Professor Wergele's here. One more video left for this lecture. We're going to talk about hidden input elements. And this is important because we're going to be using hidden input elements for our login. So make sure you save this file. And we're going to move to number 7, hidden.html. And you'll see over here on the right, we have get hidden and set hidden. What is a hidden input element? Well, first you're going to see it's hidden to the user. The user cannot see it. It still has an ID and it still has a name. So it's going to be submitted when the form is submitted. And you'll see I have a value here. Okay, you'll see this data is not visible. So it's an input element that's not visible to the user, but will still be submitted when the form is submitted. And there's various reasons why you'd want to use this hidden element, which we'll talk more about when we get to the login. For right now, just know there is an input element that's of type hidden. So I have a hidden input element, and it's hidden to the user, but still gets submitted when the form is submitted. And we'll talk more about this when we get to our login. So you'll see here, I've already implemented the get hidden function because I specified a value here. So it's logical to think I'm going to use the dot value property. But is this true? So I'm going to reference the DOM. I'm going to use the DOM's method called getElementById. I'm going to reference the dot value property. Will that get me the proper value? Let's click on hidden. You'll see this data is not visible. Now let's set that property and see if we get the same message back. Let's set that property and see if we get the same message back. So I'm going to use the DOM. I'm going to use the DOM's method getElementById. And then I'm going to use the hidden data ID, and I'm going to set the value. How do I set the value? I call the value property and I set it equal to something. And let's say the value has changed. Okay, so here I have an input type of hidden. I have an ID of hidden data. And I'm going to change the value when they click on this button. So I'm going to refresh. Make sure you save and refresh. Click get. You'll see the data is not visible. Click set. And then click get again. You'll see the value has changed. So refresh. It says data is not visible. Click set. Click get. You'll see the value has changed. So pretty much anytime you see this dot value, most likely I'm going to be using the dot value attribute. But for the select, you'll see I have dot value, but I also used the selected keyword. So that kind of gives you a hint on what I'm going to be using. So here's selected. If I go to checkboxes, okay, you'll see I use the keyword checked. If I go to radio, you'll see here I use the keyword checked. And here I use the keyword checked in the JavaScript. So on the text, scroll down, you'll see here I used nothing. So I don't have it. But in this case, we went over it. It was dot value. Radios, I had a keyword here, checked. We used checked. Checkboxes, we also used checked. And we used checked up here in the JavaScript. For select, we used selected. And we used the selected index in the JavaScript. Text area was dot value, because the value is going to be what's submitted in the form. The last one I have is the hidden input element, which I use dot value here, and we use dot value in the JavaScript. That's the first sign to know. With all HTML elements, you're going to use inner HTML. With all input elements, is going to be dot value, dot check, dot selected, depending on which one you use. If you can't find out immediately, look through the objects, see what values you have. See what values change when you change the elements. The last resort would be to Google it. Google it, see which property you should use, and make sure that's the right one. However, for the exam, make sure you're using W3 Schools. So if you Google it, and let's say Stack Overflow pops up, and they tell you to use selected when you really should use dot value, you're going to get it wrong on the exam. So make sure you're using W3 Schools, because W3 Schools is our textbook. That's it for this lecture. Next lecture, we're going to move on to more cool things using the logical side of programming. We're actually going to take a look at one of my favorite lectures and start using jQuery, which makes things much easier to do, especially when talking about JavaScript. Stick with Professor Wergele's. We're going to start jQuery, and we'll see you next time.